Yeah, as we already discussed last time, obstetrics is one of the most favorite topic of MCC. They do like to ask every single thing, multiple things from here. There's so many lines they can ask you. So in this chapter, I would recommend at least give as much time as you can when you are reading it, and highlight every single thing. Okay, like related to you feel like it's unimportant. Everything is important when it comes to obstetrics. Then comes to the preterm labor. Preterm labor is labor between 20 and 37 week. One of the most important topic is preterm labor causes. What are the most important causes? Because if you know the causes, there are multiple as like untreated bacteriuria. So they can give you a pregnant female, she was having untreated bacteriuria, or they can give you a urine analysis report where there is leukocytes around 500 in the urine or 100 in the urine, but she is not having no burning sensation, no bacteria, or no frequency, no fever, no chills, nothing like that. But she is having bacteria or the leukocytes in the urine. And it's basically non-symptomatic. So unsymptomatic bacteriuria, in that cases, they can ask you what could be the most important complication. Okay. So what is the complication? They're asking about preterm labor. Then there is another question where they can ask you about chronic illness. A mother is having for something for very long period of time. What could be the complication of that one? So most favorite is preterm labor. Then a smoking can cause IUGR, one of the most important, and along with that preterm labor. Then what is the other one is the reproductive age. If they are asking in 35-year-old female or 40-year-old female, what is the most common complication? It's basically preterm labor. So if you know like few things, especially the causes, it can give you a diagnosis right away. And it's straightforward lines from Toronto Notes where they're asking about what are the complications, what are the diagnoses, what is the cause, especially in obstetrics. Then infection, chorioamnitis is one of the most important. When they are talking about infection, the most common complication is preterm labor. At least keep it in your mind. There are other IUGR, whatever it is, but the most important are this one. HTN, diabetes mellitus, chronic illness, then pre-mechanical factors, which one obstetrical, gynecological, or abdominal surgeries, socioeconomic, which poor nutrition, a homeless female, preterm labor, or IUGR, smoking, drugs, alcohol, stress, preeclampsia, and then reproductive age. Then the maternal fetal is pre-prom. Then comes the polyhydramnios, placenta previa, placental abruption, and then placental insufficiency, multiple gravidation, gestation, congenital and fetal hydrops. Then uterine is excessive and enlargement in malformation, leiomyomas. So they can give you a question with leiomyoma. A patient is having fibroid, submucosal, subserosal, whatever they are given. She was having it. Now she is not having any symptoms, but what could be the most common complication? So leiomyoma's most common complication is preterm labor, along with bleeding and all that. Septate, uterus, Mullerian duct, and abnormalities, and more than leiomyomas causing preterm labor. How will you treat it or manage it? When we will do leiomyoma, I will let you know. Uh, then preterm labor is the most common cause of the neonatal mortality in the United States and is fifth most common cause in the Canada. So don't forget about prenatal labor. Then comes the positive fetal fibronectin in the cervico-vaginal fluid at 24 weeks, spontaneous preterm labor at less than 34 weeks. So this is something, this can be asked in a question, how will you find out preterm labor, or how you find out it's going to be a preterm labor? So in that case, the test is basically checking for the positive fetal fibronectin. This can be asked in the question, but let me tell you, this has a negative value or negative sensitivity as compared to positive sensitivity. So it has less sensitivity. So it's not something that is recommended. But in the bookish knowledge, if they ask you, then this is the test we usually do. But in daily life or practice life, we don't go for that one. But they can give you as question where they can ask you. But in that cases, it you have to see what they're looking for. And they do give you about the specificity and sensitivity, especially in this scenario. They can give you like a test which is very sensitive, or which can tell you which is diagnostic. So fibronectin is not diagnostic, it is not sensitive test. Then prior history of spontaneous preterm labor is the most important risk factor. If they have given you a patient is female, good, whatever it is, she has no complication, nothing at all, but she has a previous preterm labor, in that cases, you have to do the preterm labor management in the next one. Just like how we talk about GBS. If a patient has a previous GBS, in that case, in the next pregnancy, we go for GBS. So just keep in your mind, if this says any complication in the previous pregnancy, in the next pregnancy, we do look or do work up for that thing in the next pregnancy. Just keep it in your mind. This is a simple, straightforward rule. Then the prior history of a large or multiple cervical excisions or mechanical dilation. Then the cervical length, bacterial vaginosis. One of the most important word is this one. Bacterial vaginosis do cause preterm labor, and we do neglect when we are reading bacterial vaginosis. Even when a female is coming, recently I saw a female she was having a discharge, and she was doing fine. Although she came out positive for chlamydia, which was very unusual. But later on, we also test for bacterial vaginosis, which also came out positive. So she was asking what could be the consequences and everything. If you don't know preterm labor, you will miss out this one. So bacterial vaginosis is one of the most important. Just don't forget about this one. Bacterial vaginosis do cause preterm labor. Routine screening not supported by the current data, usually we don't do. Then family history, smoking, late maternal age, multiple gestation, and cocaine. Then what is the prevention? Uh, for me, when I was doing the revision, I only remember the name cervical cerclage, progesterone, lifestyle modification. But when I was doing it for the first time, then I kept it in my mind, what is the cervical cerclage, usually at which time we have to do. The placement of the sutures, usually at the end of T1 or T2 and removed in T3. So it is usually placed in trimester 1 and trimester 2. And this can be asked, a patient came to the family practice or follow up cervical cerclage and asking you when is they are going to remove. So it is a straightforward question, or they are asking because she has a cervical incompetence last time. So in this case, like last pregnancy, this time she's worried that she might have the preterm labor. So what will you do? In that case, is you have to place it and tell her that we are going to place it T1 and T2 and remove in T3. Straightforward line of this one. Then the diagnosis of cervical incompetence, obstetrical history, inability to cervix to hold on the inflated Foley's catheter. Then the transvaginal ultrasound will tell you the length. So if they are asking how do you find out the cervical incompetence, the first thing is previous whatever happened. Then the second one is Foley's catheter. That's we usually do. Then the third one is transvaginal ultrasound. Sometimes female don't comfortable with the Foley's catheter. So usually going for that one. So you can see here the previous history where there was cervical dilation or T2s or cervical procedure was done, like LEAP, XCN or anything like that. So previous history where you know that this could happen. And the second one is Foley's catheter. Third one is ultrasound. Proven benefit in the prevention of preterm in the females of primary structural abnormality. So in that cases, we go for cervical cerclage. Then comes the progesterone. Most important, they can ask you which length usually we go for progesterone. Indicated if the cervical length is less than 25 millimeter at less than 24 weeks. This is the exact same sentence or line you have to remember. In progesterone, when do we give the progesterone? So usually the exact mechanism is unknown, but it's just to keep the pregnancy safe. In that case, is when are you going to give? When the cervical length is less than 25 at less than 24 weeks. So just you have to remember. If the short cervix, 200 mg vaginal orally, and then the diagnosis to 36 weeks. So remembering the 200 milligram vaginally, that's not important. Just this one is important. The cervical length should be less than 25 at 24 week. So in that case, we go for progesterone. And from the time of diagnosis to 36 weeks. So since we started until 36 week. So usually we start from 24 week, then we go for 36 week. And then what is the same? The preterm labor, there was previously vaginally started and all that. So it has more better than cerclage people, because females do feel uncomfortable and don't want to go for invasive procedures. So in that case, they go for progesterone, and they always prefer the progesterone over the incompetence. So if they ask you which one is better, so usually going for the progesterone. As you can say, they say superior to cerclage in preventing preterm of singletons. It means not the multiple, not due to cervical incompetence. Okay. So if they ask you in the scenario, it is given in the scenario where they can give you same options. Like they can put you in the scenario, cervical cerclage, progesterone, lifestyle modification, or none. So you have to go for progesterone unless there is a contraindication to progesterone. Then the lifestyle modification, obviously talking about whatever the causes, you have to talk about all of them. Then the predicting preterm labor, the fibronectin we already talked about is a amniotic one done if one or more of signs of the preterm labor, done only 24 to 34 week gestation. So usually in the second trimester, kind of second trimester and third trimester. Intact membranes, they are less than 33 centimeter, and then fetal well-being. Contraindicated when there is cerclage or vaginal bleeding. So in that cases, it will be false negative anyway. So this is in many of the cases it is false negative. So we still do it. And if they ask for more accurate one, this is not a most accurate one. Then how you going to start if there is already contractions there? So in that one, go for initial. How do you initial? First of all, you have to transfer it to the appropriate facility where she can be stable or not. Then tocolysis is done and first dose of antenatal steroids prior to transfer. So you have like a patient female came and she is already having a preterm labor started. So in that case, if they ask what is the next step. So before transferring, before doing anything, go for steroid injection, then going for tocolysis, and then always start with hydration because many cases are dehydration. Bed rest in the left lateral decubitus position to reduce or aortocaval compression, so in that case improve that one. Then analgesics, avoid repeat examination to avoid the infection. Ultrasound, this can be asked what are you going to avoid and what should not be done. Okay, then ultrasound for the fetus, checking for biophysical fundal height and all that. Then the probiotic antibiotics, usually in the GBS. So in the GBS, if there is a previous case of GBS, we do go for antibiotics right away. If there is a previous case of GBS, so GBS is something you don't need to wait for anything. You can go for antibiotics right away. Consider important to consider PPROM, erythromycin, controversial, but maybe used to deliver. So just to in your mind, giving steroid, then going for the transfer wherever you are going to do, then hydration, painkillers, antibiotics. Okay, simple. And whatever is avoided, you don't have to do multiple examination. Then tocolysis, how you are going to suppress it. So basically, it does not inhibit the preterm labor, but just delayed it. So requirement is there should be preterm labor, live immature fetus, maternal contraindications. Then contraindications, what are the contraindications where you have to stop because a mother can die. So in that cases, all the cases where a mother is having any kind of problem, because if you delayed it and more chances of mother to have death or whatever. So in that cases, what are the conditions like bleeding, high blood pressure, diabetes? So keep it in your mind of whatever the condition that can make the mother worsen up her condition. Preeclampsia, eclampsia, diureoamnitis. For the fetus, wherever the fetus can die, so IUGR, where a fetal is distress, gestational abnormality. So, if you try to make the concept, you will be easy to remember that wherever the contraindications are. Then, what are the agents? Usually going for the calcium channel blockers like nifedipine. So when I was like doing a quick revision, I just remember the name. But I'm reading it the first time, then I go for the contraindication. You don't need to remember the doses. That's more of residency thing. So right now you just need to remember what are the names and what are the contraindications. So we go for calcium channel blockers like nifedipine. Relative contraindication, what are those ones like nifedipine allergy, hypotension, hepatic, or contraindication like antihypertensive medication is taking and all that. Absolute is having heart failure or on that. Prostaglandin inhibitors like indomethacin, contraindication is hepatic and heart failure or hepatic peptic ulcer disease. Antenatal corticosteroids we usually give, you need to remember when you have to give. Usually it's given 24 to 34 week, plus minus like it could be 35 week too if expected to deliver in the next 7 days. So when you are thinking of going to deliver it in next 7 days, so you can go from 24 to 34 weeks. Then the patients between 22 to 23 at high risk of preterm birth within the next 7 days should be provided with multidisciplinary consultant, like calling for the neonatal, all of those ones, like where the different consultants come over and see what they can do for them. Then antenatal corticosteroid therapy, if early intensive care is requested. So you need to see when are you not going to give corticosteroids. Usually we only avoid where there is active TB. Otherwise, we do give it in every single case. And which one? After 24 to 37, 5 week. They do give it before 24 week too, But if you could remember, from 22 week, you can start. Just keep it in your mind. Don't go into very complication. Just keep in your mind, corticosteroid can be started after 22 week. In our practice, we do start after 20 weeks, but you just have to remember the bookish thing. So usually start after 22 week. Enhance the what is it? There's the lung capacity is increased, prenatal death can be decreased, RDS, IVHS, and necrotizing enterocolitis. What is the neuroprotection? MGSO4. So now if I have to a quick revision, so I just have to memorize what are the things which is basically the prevention, cervical cerclage, progesterone, and lifestyle. When do we have to do? Just that one. Now coming back to predicting, what are the name? Fetal fibronectin, but it's not 100% sensitive. Now coming to the management, we go for the steroid, then hydration, then analgesics, and then we go for the ultrasound. And what we have to avoid? Pelvic exams. Then coming to the tocolysis, in tocolysis, what are the agents? We go for calcium channel blockers and prostaglandins. Nifedipine and prostaglandin, what we prefer over each other? So usually we go for indomethacin over nifedipine because it has better whatever thing. So usually we go for that one. So let's suppose if they're given in the scenarios, so see what are the things. Then what are the other options that we have to do? Giving steroid, which time? 22 to 35 weeks. And then the neuroprotection MGSO4. Simple, just this much you can remember. Now, if you go into very detail, so usually remembering which week is very, very important. So less than 35, 34 week, the magnesium sulfate is given. If you could see how you like, you have to keep it in your mind. So these are keywords that you at least have to keep in your mind. But if you have more time, then you can go for further things too. Then here prematurity increases newborn risk of respiratory distress, hypoglycemia, hyperbilirubinemia, apnea, feeding disabilities, seizures, and more. Believe me, these are the words that is asked in the scenario because we are just reading it as casually. So in the exam, we do forget this one. So please keep that in your mind that what could be increased in the newborn if they are born prematurely. Like apnea, something we do forget. Hyperbilirubinemia could be there. Hypoglycemia is there. Okay. Then the pre-labor rupture of the membranes. So prom, prolonged rupture of membrane. Then pre-prom. Prom is basically pre-labor rupture of membrane. Prolonged, basically more than 18 hours. And pre-prom is basically preterm and rupture of membrane. What are the complications? We already discussed the mainly the infection, low socioeconomic status, so a patient can be like a homeless and all that. So what could be the consequences? Preterm labor, we already discussed the pre-prom causes the preterm labor. So membrane ruptured, fluid came out. What happened? Now the oligohydramnios could be there or ahydramnios could be there. So in that cases, the investigation is going for the speculum examination, but avoid introduction of the infection. So you have to be very careful and you have to do it only one time. So there is pooling of the fluid and then cascading. Then nitrazine test is done. Usually low specificity we don't do for that. Then Ferning is something, and then ultrasound to rule out the fetal anomalies. So if they ask you one or two things, so usually we're going for sterile speculum exam, Ferning, ultrasound, and then nitrazine if you want to feel like. Usually when this is low specificity, we don't usually go for those things which have low specificity. So you have to keep it in your mind what are the things that you are going to do and what are you looking for. So they can be asked the signs that are looking for. So in this one, the signs we are looking for is pooling of the fluid, then cascading, and then ferning. So these are the three ones, and then going for the ultrasound. And just not knowing ultrasound, what are you looking in the ultrasound? We already discussed about BPP, but that we have to do, and then fetal movements or the weight. How do you do management? So usually go for monitor the vitals every 4 hours. Daily NST non-stress test, WBC, so checking for infection. Surveillance of infection is very, 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 very important. Then avoid introduction of the infection because usually keep checking over and over and then it can cause it. In that cases, we are going for the betamethasone. So again, the steroid injection that is basically less than 35 week. We already discussed 22 to 35 week. This will keep on repeating and then we keep on missing it out. So that's why keep it in your head. Consider tocolysis for 48 hours to permit the administration of the steroids. So you have to let the steroids work for how many hours? 48 hours. This can be asked. How many hours you would like to delay after introducing of the steroids. So it is basically 48 hours. Screen patients of the UTIs, STIs, GBS infection and treat with appropriate antibiotics if positive. So in that cases, you have to treat that. And I already told you where they are suspicious of GBS, give the treatment right away. If not in labor or labor not indicated, then and consider antibiotics. Then consider urgently if evidence of the fetal distress or chorioamnitis. Then PROM is basically the management, how you go for 22 to 25 weeks. In that one, you have to consider, individual consider with the counseling of the parents. So you need to see at which age or which week you have to do what. So for me, I used to remember after 26 week usually we do for delivery, but let's suppose we do have to start thinking of what could be the best management. So 22 to 25 week we do consider counseling, risk of preterm labor, and then 26 to 34 week there is expected management of whatever the delivery is. Then 34 to 36 we check for the if the baby can die or baby can survive or whatever the sepsis is, and for more than 37 week we do delivery right away. So for me, I start thinking after 26 week, we usually go for delivery, but you have to check for the complications, whatever it is. What are the complications? So if the water is coming out, the cord can come out, so cord prolapse. If the water comes out, then there is no fluid, so it can cause infection. Premature delivery could be there, limb contracture could be there, hypoplasia. So this limb contracture is one of the most important thing because if there is no fluid, the baby will not be able to move, so it can cause limb contracture. Just keep it in your mind. Then the postpartum delivery, pregnancy, it's mainly the baby's too big. So during pregnancy, during delivery, it can cause the cervical bone damage. So labor induction is recommended at 41 plus 3 week if no contraindication to the vaginal delivery. Then if more than 42 weeks, so what could happen? The baby could die. With the increase, there is an increased risk of infection, asphyxia, meconium aspiration. So whatever you could remember, or we already saw macrosomia, aging, placental insufficiency, operative, pneumonia, seizures, NICU admissions, stillbirth, or all those. And what could be the causes of basically high blood pressure, diabetes, abruption, IUGR? Believe me, these are the words that will be there. And if you don't focus these words, you will be. So you have to make a concept. You cannot do like memorize it right away everything. So that's why I start making concepts like what could be like for me, how do I keep it in my mind? I write down what are the causes or consequences of high blood pressure. So I write on preterm labor, like postterm birth, or the babies or whatever the IUGR. So I write down everything together. So it makes sense to me whenever I keep on repeating. It gives me an idea with high blood pressure it could be happen and how do I have to manage. So basically we have to go for preterm labor, and these things can be asked very indirectly where if you don't have a concepts you will not be able to make sense. There is no straightforward question from obstetrics, I'm telling you. There are some questions where they're testing your knowledge, but there are very many questions where they're testing your idea of understanding. Are you able to get that point that female is coming with what kind of condition? So they can give you very different signs and different symptoms, and you have to make that, is it related to abruption or is it related to previa, or in this cases should I go for delivery or should I wait? And when you are doing delivery, like this can be asked, like when you are doing a delivery, what are the next steps? Like you did this and now you are going to do what? So and then can give you it's a previa. So in that cases, if you don't know, you are going to do a vaginal delivery or you are going to do a cesarean delivery. So if you are not able to make a judgment of that one, you will not be able to attend the question. So that's why you have to make sure that your diagnosis is correct, then where is it coming from, and how you are going to manage the mother as well as the fetus. So I hope that makes sense to you. So whenever you are reading, keep it in your mind, especially for obstetrics. You have to see where is it coming from, what could be the complication that I have to prevent. Because from your answers, you are telling the next person, especially for obstetrics, they do get an idea if you are going for hydration, what are you treating here? Intrauterine fetal demise. So basically, the after 20 week, the baby is dead. So this is basically spontaneous abortion. So decreased prelepsin of the fetal movement by mother. So mother is coming to you, fetal movement. Although we discussed about stimulation, hydration, mother doing in the left lateral cubitus position, then checking for the fetal movement, mainly more than six in, I think it was in 2 hours. So you have to see. Now there, what happened is decrease of the fetal movement. So symphysis fundal height, weight, baby is not very big age, absent fetal heart tones, and then high maternal serum alpha fetoprotein on ultrasound. There is no heart rate. So although mother is coming to you, how do you confirm? Usually with ultrasound and non-stress test. So we are going to check everything, no Macy's, skull collapse, or blood tissue retraction, empty bladder, and all that. So in this one, diagnosis is absent cardiac activity, fetal movement on ultrasound. It needs to be 100% make sure with the ultrasound that baby is not having any fetal movement or any cardiac activity. Then you can just label it. Okay. This is a question can be asked like a way that mother is confirmed, mother is crying already, you did whatever it is, maternal serum alpha fetoprotein is done, so symphysis fundal height is low, like everything is done, but there is no ultrasound. So without ultrasound, you cannot tell that she's dead, the baby's dead. Then what could be the causes? Obviously, diabetes, thyroid, clear Bedke test, VDRL, ANA. So in that case, why are you doing the secondary testing? For the upcoming pregnancy. So you have to do INR, PTT, urine toxicology, this one. And a question can be asked now the fetal demise is already, first is, what is the thing? Okay, so it is asked like, okay, I'll let you know. So here we are talking about DIC is basically obstetrics of the, what are the causes? The placental abruption, gestational hypertension, fetal demise, PPH. Then the DIC is specific blood work, CBC, APTT, PT, FDP, and fibrinogen. Then treatment is treat underlying causes, sportive fluids, blood products, then FFP, then platelets and precipitate, and then the antiplatelet. So you need to know the treatment. More than 20 weeks, usually we do the induction of the labor and then remove the baby. Monitor for the maternal coagulopathy, parent psychological care, and the bereavement support as per the hospital protocol. Then the comprehension discussion within 3 months. So checking for what is the possible causes or what could be the consequences of future pregnancies. Then the intrauterine growth restriction. Intrauterine growth restriction is basically maternal. What are those ones? So we already know high blood pressure is there. Okay, since I already keep on telling you the high blood pressure. And then one of most important thing is we always know that, diabetes causes macrosomia. So think of diabetes, basically type 1 diabetes do causes intrauterine growth restriction. Just for your knowledge, if some disease is there in the first trimester, it do causes intrauterine growth restriction. Just for your idea, it can help you to memorize, like if there is any disease, like usually in according to obstetrics, any disease that started after second trimester, it is basically related to obstetrics. But some, like as of type 1 diabetes, SLE, drug issues or whatever, if it's present from the very start, it do causes the growth. So it causes IUGR. So just for your idea and keeping you in concept. So as you can see, whatever is there, it's basically the one that is starting from the first trimester. Then the placenta, if there's a placental insufficiency, infarction, hemangioma, placental previa, and then cord insertion. For the fetus, if there is any torch infection, one of the most important thing, torch infection, multiple gestation, and then chromosomal abnormalities. Then you need to just, if you can go a little bit detail of what are the chromosomal abnormalities that causes IUGR. Then here, symmetrical and asymmetrical. There is one thing here. In the symmetrical, there is basically head circumference and the abdominal circumference may be normal, so usually associated with the congenital abnormalities, and they don't survive for too long. If there is symmetry, just remember symmetry does not survive. If there is asymmetry, so head circumference is spared, so head is not spared, like head is not involved. So in that cases, they do survive for a long period of time and they do get out of that one. So fetus abdomen is disproportionate, smaller than fetal head, and brain is spared. So in that cases, they don't have any head problems, like any like brain issues or anything like that. Prone to meconium aspiration, asphyxia, polycythemia, hypoglycemia, hypocalcemia. So don't forget about hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia. I keep on mentioning it over and over again. Hypophosphatemia, hyponatremia, intellectual disability. checking for the symphysis fundal height, how much it is, and then going for ultrasound. So, as we already discussed about symphysis fundal height, don't forget wherever we are going to do checking for the fetus, we do check for the ultrasound just to make sure that the baby is growing okay. And whatever we are checking outside, is it the same from inside as well? Because the baby could be horizontal position, so that's why it could be different. So ultrasound for the biparietal, where you're checking the head circumference with abdominal fetal length, sorry, femur length, then the fetal weight, and then amniotic fluid volume. Then the decrease in the rate of the growth, BPP, then Doppler analysis for the umbilical cord blood flow. Prevention via modification, asking them to eat healthy diet, abuse, drug abuse should be avoided, serial BPP, then delivery with intrauterine existence, optimize the fetus with the betamethasone and MgSO4 for the neuroprotection. So keep it in your mind, what is the neuroprotection drug? The magnesium sulfate is the neuroprotection drug. Then early GBS swab and then pediatrics culture, full console, and then IUGR, as well as the less likely to withstand stress of the labor. So just for your idea here, when are you going to do the cesarean delivery for IUGR? Because for IUGR, usually we prefer the vaginal delivery. So just because sometimes IUGR is cannot withstand the stress of the labor, so we go for the cesarean delivery. So what are the causes, or what could be the consequences where are there is they can are unable to withstand the stress of the labor? What are those ones? Okay. Macrosomia is the baby big, usually involved with the diabetes. That's one of the most famous, and then macrosomia infant or maternal weight or all this one. In this one, the prenatal mortality, CPD, and then birth injuries like shoulder dystocia, all are very common. Checking for symphysis fundal height, again, we are going to do the ultrasound. In this one, usually the mother is hyperglycemia, then the baby born, they do have hyperglycemia, but don't forget they also have hypoglycemia as well. So the mother who gave the diabetic mother who gave birth, what is the common prevention? What is the most common prevention is preventing the hypoglycemia in the infant. So if I don't know if not mentioned here, so it's very common the hypoglycemia in the diabetic infant. So preventing the hyperglycemia in the patients with the diabetes, pre-pregnancy weight, limit exercise, the pregnancy weight gain, and then planned cesarean section to avoid for the any birth injuries. Then polyhydramnios and then oligohydramnios. In this one, you need to remember the causes. So for the poly, the type 1 diabetes causes poly, maternal fetal multiple gestation, and then fetal hydrops in the mother, in the female, sorry, in the fetus, the chromosomal abnormality, cystic anhydrous, and then encephaly, hydrocephalus, tracheoesophageal fistula, and then duodenal atresia. At least remember one or two from each of them, especially what are the CNS and what are the GI. Now, if you're coming to oligohydramnios, it has uteroplacental insufficiency, and then it is caused by the ACE inhibitors. Then coming to the fetus, it has like a urinary tract infection. Then chronic hypoxemia. Then IUGR, ruptured membranes where the fluid got leaked out. That's why. If you see, poly has more of a GI symptoms and CNS. Even GI, there is omphalocele that could be also linked with this one. So gastroesophageal fistula and duodenal atresia, I think it is also linked with the Down syndrome too. So please check which is it oligo or is it poly? Which one is linked with the Down syndrome? Either one of them are linked with Down syndrome. I'm not sure which one. Then clinical features, there is a uterus large for the gestational age, then palpating the fetal parts, and then hearing the fetal heart rate. What could be the pressure? So in the mother, all the pressure symptoms. In the obstetrics, it's mainly everything is pushing out. So cord prolapse, placental abruption, malpresentation, preterm labor. So they will push out everything. So just for your understanding. How do you manage? So you have to take out the fluid. So screen for the maternal disease or infection, then ultrasound, and depend on the severity, what is it? And then this basically what do we do is therapeutic amniocentesis. So if they ask what are the treatment, this is basically therapeutic amniocentesis. Now here, if you look into this one, oligohydramnios, this thing could be asked. The Amniotic fluid band can lead to the Potter's faces, limb deformities, and then abdominal wall defects. Sorry, the abdominal wall defects are here in with this one, not with this one. Sorry. The omphalocele and the gastroschisis is mainly with this one. Then obstetrical complications, the cord compression, increased risk of the fetal outcomes, pulmonary hypoplasia, markers for the infants who may not indicate the labor. So in this one, checking for the monitoring and then ultrasound, we are going to do the hydration and putting the amniocentesis, like doing the fluid again inside with the injection. So what you need to remember here, what could be the consequences or causes of the polyhydramnios and oligohydramnios, and how do they present? Like which diseases are linked with which one? Okay, because you are going to keep memorizing it over and over. And then this one, the management is basically amniocentesis. For this one, the management is putting the fluid bag. And how you do, but for both of them, we go for fetal monitoring and ultrasound. So that's not a different thing. And then in which one the fetus does not survive. So usually the fetus does not survive in the polyhydramnios. More fluid, they will drown. Think of this one. Then antenatal depression, we are already aware in the psychiatry, we do discuss a little bit. So in this one, just think about where the fetus is in depression, or the antenatal, like a mother is coming to you, she's already pregnant and she is having depression and wanted to uh, abort the baby. So you have to respect her wishes. Here may be associated with the altered physiological effects, advanced pregnancy and neonatal outcomes, abnormal infants, development, cognitive. So in that cases, if mother does not want to continue the pregnancy, so in that cases, you have to respect her choice and let her do the abortions. And in that cases, if you are not comfortable, you can always refer the mother to a different obstetrics or different doctor. Then the multifetal gestation and malpresentation. In this one, what is the maternal one? What could be the consequences? Uteroplacental and then fetal. Here is the complication just for your idea, if you can remember these ones: puking, pallor, preeclampsia, pressure, PTL, pre-prom, polyhydramnios, then placental previa, PPH, prolonged labor, cord prolapse, prematurity. So everything that is pushing out. Malpresentation, prenatal morbidity, prenatal distress, postpartum depression. Usually we go for ultrasound. So wherever we are making any diagnosis for the fetus, in that we have to go for the ultrasound. Although we go for NST and all that, but usually ultrasound is the one that actually gives you an idea. And may be done within first trimester, usually at 8 to 12 week. And then the serial ultrasound to make sure that whatever you said was the right, and which one was it, chorioamnitis and then umbilical and uncomplicated. These pictures are very, very important. So you need to see which one are those ones. It can be given in the exam and ask you which one it is. Or it can be asked like fluid is same or the umbilical cord is same. There's two different umbilical cords or they are attached with each other. The baby is attached. There is a separate placenta for each of them. There is no separate placenta or what is going on with them. Okay. So in that cases, you need to know which one are those ones, the chorioamnitis or the monochorionic diamniotic one. And what you need to remember from here is in which cases we go for cesarean delivery and in which cases we go for vaginal delivery. May attempt the vaginal delivery if twin A appears as vertex and the growth discrepancy is less than 25%. Otherwise, we go for cesarean delivery. So just for your simple straightforward thing. And then they says all monochorionic and monoamniotic. So if you don't know what is monochorionic and monoamniotic, you will not be able to make the diagnosis. And more than that, you need to see what is the monochorionic and monodiamniotic. So it means they have only one amniotic fluid and also they have the same chorions. So in that cases, you need to do the cesarean delivery. Mode of delivery depends on the weight, gestational discrepancy, and all that. So for your idea, you just need to memorize these two important lines. What are those ones? When are you going to do the vaginal delivery? And which cases you are going to 100% do the cesarean delivery? Then you need to see these pictures and you have to know and understand what are they saying here. Um, there's one thing here, like here. So when is the serial ultrasound going to be done? after how many weeks and after how many times. So it says serial ultrasound every 2 to 3 week from 16 week, and for every 3 to 4 week from 18 to 22 week.